The mountain man stopped walking, not because of danger, not because of fear, because his heart forgot how to beat. Across the muddy edge of the trading post stood a small girl, thin as hunger itself. Her dress hung loose, her boots were cracked, and around her neck rested a silver bear pendant, its paws raised mid-roar. Elias Hawk felt the world tilt, his breath caught hard in his chest. He had shaped that bear with his own hands, for his daughter. For the child he had buried in his soul years ago. How could it be here now? He did not move. He did not speak. He only stared, as if one blink might erase her. The girl sensed him before she saw him. Her shoulders stiffened. Slowly, she lifted her head. Her eyes were wide and cautious, the eyes of someone used to being forgotten. Elias took one step forward, then another. The trading post sounds faded. Wagons, voices, wind. All gone. There was only the bear, and the child wearing it. Years ago, Elias Hawk had lost everything in one night of fire and screaming. Raiders had come down from the pass like wolves. His cabin burned. His wife vanished. His 7-year-old daughter never came back. When the snow settled, Elias was left with nothing but silence and a matching silver bear he wore beneath his buckskin shirt. Since then, he lived like a ghost among the mountains, trapping and wandering, breathing but not alive. Now the past stood in front of him, small and shaking. The people of Ridge Hollow noticed the change in the air. Conversations stopped. A mother pulled her son closer. The town marshal shifted his stance, one hand resting near his gun. The mountain man was never just a man. He was a warning. Elias felt their eyes, but he did not turn. His focus never left the girl. He knelt. The simple act startled everyone. A man like him did not kneel, but he lowered himself slowly, bringing his eyes level with hers. The girl flinched, ready to run, but she stayed. Something held her there. Elias lifted one trembling hand and pointed, not at her face, but at the necklace. "That," he said quietly. His voice was rough, unused. "Where did you get it?" Quote. The girl swallowed. "It was my mama's," she whispered. The words hit him like a blade. Before he could speak again, footsteps rushed forward. A woman pushed through the gathering crowd, breath sharp with fear. She grabbed the girl's shoulder and pulled her close. Her eyes locked onto Elias, then dropped to the matching silver bear, now visible at his open collar. The color drained from her face. "I was afraid of this day," the woman said softly. The crowd leaned in. Even the wind seemed to listen. Inside the woman's small cabin, the air smelled of soap and old wood. Elias stood near the door, unwilling to sit, as if walls might close in on him. The girl stayed close to the woman, watching him with careful eyes. "My name is Ruth Miller," the woman began. "This is Lily. She's my niece." Elias said nothing. His chest felt tight. Ruth continued, her hands folded to keep them from shaking. "Years ago, my brother found a woman near a frozen ravine. She was barely alive. No memory, no name, only that necklace clutched in her fist. He took her in, she healed, she chose a new name, she became my sister." Elias's knees weakened. He braced himself against the doorframe. "She never remembered her past," Ruth went on, "but sometimes she would hum the same tune, over and over. Sometimes she would stare west for hours. She said it felt important, like someone was missing." Elias closed his eyes. "She died of fever 3 winters ago," Ruth finished. "My brother too. Lily is all that's left." Quote. Silence filled the room, thick, heavy. The truth settled slowly, cruel and complete. His wife had survived, but not for him. She had lived another life, loved another man, raised another child. And then she was gone again, forever. Elias opened his eyes and looked at Lily. She stared back, fear mixing with something else now. Curiosity, hope. He knelt again, closer this time. "I had a daughter once," he said. I made that necklace for her, for protection." Lily's fingers curled around the silver bear. "She said it was special," Lily murmured. "Said it meant someone would always find their way back." A single tear cut a clean path through the dirt on Elias's face. Outside, a knock struck the cabin door. Hard. "Official," the marshal's voice followed. "Hawk, we need to talk." Elias stood slowly. The moment was broken, but not lost. He met Ruth's eyes. There was understanding there. And a question. A future waiting to be chosen. As Elias stepped toward the door, the mountains beyond Ridge Hollow loomed dark and watchful. He did not know yet that the past was not finished with him, that old enemies still remembered his name, or that staying would demand more than survival. Only that for the first time in years he was no longer alone, and that everything he thought he had lost had returned, in a form he never expected. Elias stepped outside into the cold air, the cabin door closing softly behind him. The marshal waited near the porch, his face hard but measured. The crowd had thinned, though eyes still watched from behind shutters and wagons. News traveled fast in Ridge Hollow. Too fast. "You stirred up old ground today," Marshal Cole Bennett said. "People don't like ghosts walking back into town." Elias met his gaze without challenge. "I didn't come looking for trouble." "No," Bennett said, "but trouble has a way of finding men like you." They stood in silence for a moment. Wind moved through the pines above the settlement, carrying the sound of something distant and low. Elias knew that sound well. A warning. The mountains speaking. "There's been a problem," the marshal continued. "A big one. Livestock taken. Traps torn apart. Folks are scared." "A bear," Elias said. Bennett's brow tightened. "A big grizzly. Old. Smart. Hurt someone last week." Elias nodded once. He had already sensed it. The land always spoke to him first. "You want to stay," the marshal said. "You deal with it." It wasn't a threat. It was a test. Before Elias could answer, the cabin door creaked open. Lily stood there, half hidden behind Ruth's skirt. Her eyes met his. Something passed between them. Quiet. Unspoken. "I'll handle it," Elias said. The marshal studied him for a long moment, then stepped back. At first light. That night, Elias did not sleep. He sat by his small fire at the edge of town, sharpening his blade by habit more than need. His thoughts stayed on the cabin. On Lily, on the silver bear resting against her small chest. At dawn, he moved into the mountains like breath itself. He followed signs no one else noticed. A snapped twig bent the wrong way. Stones shifted against their will. Silence where birds should have been. The bear was wounded. That much was clear. Its path was uneven. Its hunger desperate. Hours later, Elias found the truth. Rusted iron. A broken snare buried in frozen mud. Not an accident. Careless. Cruel. "Someone did this," he muttered. The trail led higher, into narrow stone corridors where sound died quickly. Elias moved slowly, reading the land. Then he heard it. A deep, broken growl. Not rage. Pain. He entered the bear's den alone. The end came fast. Quiet. Necessary. When Elias emerged, the mountains felt still again. Balanced. Behind him, boots scraped stone. "You didn't have to kill it," a voice sneered. 3 men stood there. One held a rifle loose in his grip. The leader stepped forward, young and bitter-eyed. "Name's Cole Harper," the man said. "That bear cost me half my herd." Quote. Elias looked at the broken snare hanging from the man's belt. "This cost you more," Elias said. Understanding flashed too late. The confrontation ended without blood, but not without truth. By the time Elias returned to Ridge Hollow, the story had already changed. The mountain man was no longer a threat. He was a protector. Days passed. Elias stayed. He taught Lily how to read tracks in soft dirt, how to listen, how not to fear silence. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Lily held up the silver bear. "My mama said you never really lose people," she said. "They just change where they live." Elias swallowed hard. That night, far beyond the ridges, a fire burned where it should not have, and men who remembered Elias Hawk spoke his name again. The past was waking. Elias felt it before anyone spoke of it. Smoke drifted into the valley 2 mornings later, thin but wrong. The birds were quiet again. Lily noticed first. She paused mid-step beside him, her small hand still wrapped in his sleeve. "The mountains sound empty," she said. Elias followed her gaze. "That's because they are listening." By noon, the scout arrived on a lathered horse, fear riding him harder than the trail. He barely stayed upright as he shouted the warning. Riders, armed, moving fast through the eastern pass. The settlement broke into noise. Men argued. Women gathered children. Old rifles were pulled from corners where they had slept for years. Marshal Bennett tried to bring order, but panic does not listen easily. Elias moved through it all without raising his voice. "Barricades won't save you," he said calmly. "Open ground will get you killed." Bennett turned to him. "Then tell us what will." "The land," Elias answered, "if you let it." He spoke quickly then, quietly. He pointed out the narrow ravines, the stone bends where horses would have to slow, the choke points where numbers meant nothing. The men listened, not because he demanded it, but because fear had no better option. Lily was taken with the others to the old mine shaft above town. Ruth held her close, whispering reassurances she barely believed herself. Lily twisted back once, searching the crowd. Elias met her eyes and gave a small nod. It was enough. Dusk fell heavy and red. The riders came like shadows stretched too long. Their leader rode at the front, tall in the saddle, his movements confident. Too confident. Fire lit the edge of the settlement. A scream followed. Then gunfire. Elias waited. When the first rider entered the ravine, the trap closed. Rocks fell. Shots echoed. Horses screamed. The attackers regrouped fast. These were not careless men. They adjusted, pressed harder. Then Elias saw him. The leader turned his horse just enough for firelight to touch his face. Recognition struck like ice. Landon Pike, a trapper, a man Elias once trusted, a man who vanished days before Elias's cabin burned. The betrayal burned hotter than any fire. Pike lifted his head, scanning the chaos. His eyes found Elias standing high on a ledge, outlined by flame and smoke. Pike smiled. "Bring him," Pike shouted. "Alive." The fight changed shape. The raiders surged toward Elias's position. He moved before they reached him, drawing them deeper, leading them where the land would betray them. He leapt rooftops, slipped through alleys, struck and vanished, but Pike followed, always closer. Inside the trading post, the air was thick with smoke and heat. Elias backed through the shadows, listening. Pike entered slow, confident, a blade loose in his hand. "You should have stayed dead," Pike said. Elias said nothing. Pike lunged. Elias moved aside, using crates, ropes, angles. Pike was strong, fast, but impatient. "You lost everything," Pike sneered. "I just finished the job." The words nearly broke him. Elias waited for the mistake. When it came, he acted. The bellows roared. Hot ash exploded outward. Pike screamed, blinded, crashing into a rack of tools that collapsed over him. Silence followed. Heavy, final. Outside, the raiders fled or fell. The settlement stood. At dawn, Pike was bound, broken, still smiling through blood. "They paid me to find you," he rasped. "Not just once. They're still looking." The words stayed. Weeks passed. Repairs began. Trust formed where fear once lived. Elias built a small cabin near Ruth's land. Lily helped, handing him nails like they were treasures. Some nights, Elias still woke to ghosts. But each morning, Lily waited outside his door. One evening, she held up a small metal bear she had shaped herself, crooked, proud. "Protection," she said. Elias smiled for the first time in years. Yet far north, in lands unnamed, Men studied a map marked with a bear symbol and a family name long thought gone. Elias Hawk was no longer hiding, and the world had noticed. Winter arrived early that year. Not with a storm, but with silence. Snow dusted the rooftops of Ridge Hollow in thin, careful layers, like the land was testing its own breath. Elias stood outside his newly built cabin, watching Lily chase her shadow across the frost. She laughed when she slipped. The sound still startled him sometimes. Joy felt fragile, borrowed. Inside the settlement, things had changed. Men nodded when Elias passed. Some stopped to speak. Others asked quiet questions about traps, trails, weather signs. He answered when needed, said little otherwise. Trust was not loud. It grew like roots. Marshal Bennett visited often, not as law, as company. "They're rebuilding faster than I expected," Bennett said one evening, watching smoke rise from repaired chimneys. "You gave them something solid." Elias shook his head. "They found it themselves." That night, Ruth brought out the small leather pouch Lily's mother had once carried. She placed it gently on the table between them. The fire crackled low. "She kept this close," Ruth said, even when she couldn't explain why. Inside were simple things: a smooth creek stone, a dried mountain flower, a feather worn thin with age. Elias's hand hovered, then stopped. The stone turned in his palm. On its surface, barely carved, was a trail crossing a peak. His breath caught. "That's mine," he said softly. "I carved it for her, long before the fire." Ruth's eyes filled. She remembered more than she knew. Later, as Lily slept, Elias stepped outside and looked to the dark ridgeline. For years he had believed memory was fragile, easy to erase. Now he knew better. Some things buried themselves too deep to burn. The next morning, a rider arrived. Not panicked, measured. He carried a sealed message taken from Landon Pike's belongings. A map. Names. A symbol burned into the paper. A bear. Bennett laid it out flat. "This isn't random," he said. "Someone wanted you found." Elias studied the mark. His jaw tightened. He knew it, had seen it once before, carved into an old rifle stock passed down through stories. "It's my family's," he said, "or what's left of it." The realization settled heavy. His cabin had not burned by chance. His life had not shattered by accident. He had been hunted. That evening, the wind shifted. Elias felt it in his bones. The mountains were changing their tone again. 2 nights later, the first shot rang out near the eastern tree line. No one was hurt. It was a warning. Tracks were found by morning. Fresh. Many. Not raiders. Scouts. Bennett gathered the men. Fear stirred again. Quieter this time. Smarter. "They're testing us," Elias said, "seeing how we respond." "And if we don't?" Bennett asked. "They'll come closer." Ruth listened from the doorway, Lily tucked against her side. Lily's fingers tightened around the silver bear. Elias knelt in front of her, met her eyes. "Sometimes," he said gently, "being brave means staying hidden." She nodded, trusted him. The scouts never crossed into the settlement, but they watched. Days passed under that weight. Nights felt thinner. Then, one morning, Elias found something outside his cabin. A carved bear. Fresh wood. Placed carefully on a stump. A message. He didn't sleep that night. He packed before dawn. Blade. Rifle. Minimal supplies. Bennett found him at the edge of town. "You're leaving," the marshal said. "For a while," Elias answered. "This ends if I lead it away." Bennett looked toward the mine shaft. "And the girl?" Elias's throat tightened. "That's why it has to be me." Lily ran to him when she realized, wrapped her arms around his waist without a word. He knelt and held her, breathing in the scent of smoke and pine. "I'll come back," he said. She pulled away and placed something in his hand, the crooked metal bear she had made. "So you don't forget," she said. He smiled, though his eyes burned. Elias left Ridge Hollow as the sun crested the peaks. He did not look back until the settlement was out of sight. The mountains closed around him, familiar and cold. Somewhere ahead, men waited who believed bloodlines could be erased, who believed fear could finish what fire had started. They were wrong. Elias Hawk was done running, and the mountains remembered his name. The mountains welcomed Elias back the way they always had. Cold, honest, unforgiving. Snow thickened as he climbed higher, swallowing his tracks within minutes. That was good. Elias moved with care, not hiding in fear, but shaping the hunt. He no longer followed trails. He created absence. Silence where there should be signs. Confusion where certainty was expected. By the second day, he felt them, not close, but patient. Men who believed numbers mattered more than knowledge. Men who thought the wilderness could be read like a map. Elias almost pitied them. Almost. He made camp where no one sensible would. Between two stone faces, wind screaming through like a warning. He built no fire, ate cold, waited. Night pressed down hard, stars sharp as broken glass. Near dawn he heard it, a misstep, too heavy, too rushed. Elias moved before thought caught up. He circled wide, keeping elevation. Below, 3 men picked their way through the ravine, rifles slung careless, scouts, confident. One never knew what hit him. Elias struck fast, silent. A blow to the neck, a twist. The man dropped without a sound. The others froze too late. Elias vanished before they could raise a shout. He left the body where it fell. A message. By the 4th day, the hunters became hunted. Elias led them into narrow passes where sound betrayed them. He collapsed trails behind him, triggered stonefalls that separated them. Fear began to seep in. The land stopped feeling friendly. On the 5th night, Elias found their main camp. 10 men. Tired, cold, angry. At the center sat a man with a fur-lined coat and a silver ring etched with a bear. He was older, smarter. He did not shout. He listened. That was the one who mattered. Elias waited until the wind shifted. Then he stepped into the firelight. Rifles came up instantly. The men shouted. The leader raised a hand. "Elias Hawk," the man said calmly, "you made this difficult." Elias did not move. "You burned my home." The man smiled thinly. "We burned many homes. You took my family." "We took a name," the man corrected. "One that should have ended." The fire cracked between them. The mountains leaned closer. "You think killing me fixes this?" Elias asked. "No," the man said, "but it slows what's coming." That was all Elias needed to hear. He threw the knife not at the man, but at the lantern hanging above the fire. Darkness exploded. Flames vanished. Men shouted. Gunfire erupted wild and blind. Elias moved through shadow and panic like a force of nature. He disarmed, disabled, vanished, returned. Each strike precise, necessary. When the chaos settled, only 2 men remained standing. Elias and the leader. They circled slowly. Snow drifted into the dying fire pit. "You could have stayed hidden," the man said. "Lived quietly." "I tried," Elias replied. The leader lunged. Elias met him head-on. They collided hard, rolled, struggled. Age and arrogance cost the man his balance. Elias pinned him, blade at his throat. "Finish it!" The man spat. Elias held still, thought of Lily, thought of the crooked metal bear, thought of what it meant to end something. "No," Elias said, "you'll carry this back." He cut the man's coat, carved the bear symbol from the ring, tossed it into the snow. "Tell them," Elias said quietly. "I'm not running, and I'm not alone." He stood and walked away. By the time he reached Ridge Hollow days later, his body ached, and his face was lined with fresh scars. The settlement stirred as he entered. Then Lily ran. She hit him hard, arms tight, breathless with relief. He knelt and held her like something holy. "You came back," she whispered. "I promised," he said. Behind her, Ruth wiped her eyes. Bennett nodded once. That night, the fire burned warm. Laughter returned. Outside, the mountains rested. The threat had not ended. But it had learned something, and so had Elias Hawk. Home was no longer a memory. It was a choice. Spring came quietly to Ridge Hollow. Not all at once, not boldly. It arrived in small signs, meltwater running where ice had ruled, buds pushing through stubborn soil, the sound of birds returning, careful at first, then louder each morning. Elias noticed every change. He always had. But now he noticed something else too. Peace. It did not mean safety. It meant balance. Elias stood outside his cabin at dawn, shaping a piece of metal over a small forge. Lily sat nearby, watching the sparks leap into the air like fireflies. She had learned not to flinch, learned that heat could create, not just destroy. "What are you making?" she asked. Elias held up the shape. "A bear." Stronger lines this time. "Cleaner. For you," he said, "to keep." She smiled, wide and proud. "I already have one." He nodded. "This one's different." "This one means home." Life settled into a steady rhythm. Elias taught Lily how to read the sky for storms, how to listen for trouble without fear. Ruth taught her letters in the evenings, her voice soft as lamplight. Marshall Bennett stopped by less often now. That, too, was a good sign. One afternoon, a rider arrived from the south. He carried no threats, no demands, only a quiet truth. The men Elias had faced were gone, scattered. Their interest in Ridge Hollow ended the moment Elias made his stand. Some names carried weight, others invited storms. Elias's name now did both. That night, Elias sat alone outside, the mountains dark against the stars. He thought of the life he once lived, the cabin, the laughter, the firelight. He thought of loss, of years spent walking with ghosts. Lily stepped out beside him, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders without asking. "You're quiet," she said. "I was remembering," he replied. She leaned against him. "Mama said remembering can hurt, but forgetting hurts worse." Elias swallowed. She was right. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver bear Lily had shaped months ago. He placed it in her hand. "You kept me found," he said. Lily frowned. "You were already here, quote." He smiled. "I didn't know it yet." Time moved forward, as it always does. Ridge Hollow grew stronger, not bigger, stronger. People helped each other without keeping count. The mountains remained wild, but no longer watched in silence alone. One evening, as the sun bled gold into the hills, Elias carved a final mark into the doorframe of his cabin. A small symbol, a trail crossing a peak, Ruth noticed. "What does it mean?" "It means someone stayed," Elias said. Lily traced it with her fingers. "Forever?" Elias considered the word, then nodded. "As long as I'm needed." The wind moved through the trees, gentle this time. The land was at ease. Elias Hawk had not reclaimed what he lost. He had built something new, something earned. He had learned that blood could be broken, but bonds chosen could hold fast. That love did not always return in the shape you expect, but it always returned if you were brave enough to see it. As night settled over Ridge Hollow, a fire burned steady in the hearth. A child slept without fear. And a mountain man, once hollowed by grief, rested at last. Not because the world was safe, but because his heart was no longer empty. If you felt this tale in your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Archives of the Wild West, where every story rides through the dust, the danger, and the kind of love that never dies. See you in the next tale, partner.